I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal.
Dred Scott was an African American born into slavery in 1799. He unsuccessfully sued for his freedom in 1847 for being a slave with his family in slavery-banned states. Although he had no proof, 10 years later his case went to the Supreme Court. He lost because they said people of African ancestry couldn't sue because they couldn't ever be citizens of the United States. In 1850, Supreme Court freed Scott and his family, but then changed their minds for the second time in 1852. Finally, he was freed in 1857, less than 9 months before he died from tuberculosis the next September. This was one of the first acts to begin African American struggle for freedom. Starting in 1877, there were a series of laws set against African Americans. They were more than a series of anti-black laws. It was a way of life, the Jim Crow laws. The system was run by the belief that whites were more superior to blacks in all aspects of life. The laws practiced segregation, which was supposed to be separate but equal, but was turned into separate but unequal. All across the East, mainly the Southeast, there were separate and poorer facilities for schools, restaurants, hotels, transportation, theaters, churches, parks, and restrooms. They ended by the Civil Acts Rights of 1964 under Supreme Court's rule.
Emmett Till was a 14-year-old boy from Chicago. The summer of 1955, he went to Money, Mississippi to visit his uncle Mosey Wright. Life in Chicago was different from life in Mississippi. Emmett went to the Bryant grocery store and talked to the white lady, Carolyn Bryant, behind the counter. A couple days later, Roy Bryant and his half-brother, J.W. Willem, abducted Emmett from his uncle's home. They had taken him out to a barn, beaten, and shot him to death. The men then tied a 75-pound cotton gin around his neck with a barbed wire. He was thrown into the Tallahatchie River, with the cotton gin weighing him down.
About 3 blocks away, an odor met me that nearly knocked me out. I said, "What on earth in the world is that?" It was Emmett's body. That's how the smell was so strong until it covered a 2 or 3 block area. My father was on one side of me, and Rayfield Moody was on the other side of me, and Jean was at my back. And I shrugged them. I said, "Turn me loose. I've got a job to do, and I don't have time to be fainting now." I saw his tongue had been choked out, and it was lying down on his chin. I saw that this eye was out, and it was lying about midway the cheek. I looked at this eye, and it was gone. I looked at the bridge of his nose, and it looked like someone had taken a meat chopper and chopped it. And I looked at his teeth, because I took so much pride in his teeth. His teeth were the prettiest things I'd ever seen in my life, I thought. And I only saw 2. Where are the rest of them? They'd just been knocked out. And I was looking at his ears. His ears were like mine. They curled. They're not attached, and they curled up. The same way mine are. And I didn't see the ear. Where's the ear? And that's when I discovered a hole about here, and I could see daylight on the other side. if that's a bullet hole, was that necessary? And I also discovered that they had taken an axe and they had gone straight down across his head, and the face and the back of the head were separate.
Rosa Parks was just like any other woman after long days of work, tired and weary. It is said that she would have given up her seat to a child or an elderly person. She was just tired of the way people were treating African Americans, so she stayed in her seat. This happened December 1st, 1955. Parks was 42 years old. This circumstance led to the Montgomery bus boycott. Rosa Parks was arrested and fined for violating city ordinance. Parks went to court expecting the expected. A year later, December 21st, 1956, Montgomery's public transportation system was legally combined.
In 1955, the Women's Political Council started a boycott to coincide with Rosa Parks' arrest for not giving up her seat on a bus to a white man. Originally planned to be just for the day of her trial, the Montgomery bus boycott lasted a little over a year. It was a cry for social justice and equality by 42,000 black residents refusing to ride city buses. Instead, they carpooled, took taxis, trains, or just walked. African Americans eventually won their right against segregated buses throughout the U.S. in 1965 by the Supreme Court.
Little Rock 9 was a group of African Americans who enrolled into an all-white Central High School in Arkansas in 1957. This event was so big the National Guard was called in. Many whites disapproved, so they challenged the armed forces by standing outside the school in a mob, yelling, protesting, and threatening. The first year they were there, they were accompanied by the U.S. Army. They were verbally assaulted, spit on, and hated upon every day. Eventually 3 graduated, Ernest Green being the first one expelled for throwing chili on a student, and the others either moved, dropped out, or didn't graduate. This was one of the most important events of the civil rights movement.
In the April of 1963, Martin Luther King Jr. went to Birmingham, Alabama to lead protests against segregation. Birmingham was one of the most segregated cities in the U.S. As the demonstrators marched peacefully down the street, they were stopped by the police and attacked by dogs and hoses. Dozens, including King, were jailed. While the city leaders and King's Southern Christian Leadership Conference were negotiating, King's Hotel and Brother's House were bombed. President Kennedy moved troops into the city and peace was established. The city agreed to partial desegregation. This courage displayed by Martin Luther and demonstrators inspired other nonviolent protests throughout the South.
Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was a United States civil rights leader. Between 1957 and 1968, King spoke over 2,500 times and showed up wherever there was a protest, action, and unfairness. During the bus boycott, King was arrested, his house was bombed, and he experienced personal abuse. But at the same time, he became an African American leader of the first rank. In 1963, King delivered his famous "I Have a Dream" speech and was named Man of the Year by Time magazine. The next year, he received the Nobel Peace Prize at the age of 35, making him the youngest man to have gotten one. On April 4, 1968, King was standing on his hotel balcony in Memphis, Tennessee, where he was to lead a protest march. Instead, he was assassinated.